What a great crowd for the night and the great topic of money as a common. And I will just briefly introduce you to the Alliance for Just Money and the crew that we have here tonight. We are the nonpartisan organization to really achieve a monetary reform, and that will help us achieve a more perfect union, general prosperity, and all the good things. So we're going to learn more tonight about money as a common. And I will go ahead and write the link to our guidelines and also share my screen to tell you about our community guidelines, because we want this space to be very welcoming and open for everybody to participate. So our first guideline, if I can move this out of the way, is that we respect everybody's differences. We are open to all perspectives and identities. We strive to understand all of the experiences and viewpoints, and we take responsibility for our actions and impact, as well as avoiding attacks and microaggressions. Our second guideline is that we recognize social and power dynamics. So please think consciously of your social position. This will allow us to work across gender, age, education, sexuality, all of the different identities that people have. Our third guideline is that it helps to be open to discomfort and learning. So please acknowledge your values and visions and be ready to be challenged. Exercise respect and compassion. And agreeing to disagree is perfectly fine and encouraged. And as you participate tonight, please be clear and concise. This one mostly applies to written communication, but also consider it as you might use acronyms or such. Please be very clear in your words. Our other guideline is to be extra clear in your writing. And this guideline is to very much listen attentively and be okay with silence. That gives other people the time to think and respond. Share your talking time and invite others to share their thoughts. Please read attentively before you respond. And our sixth and last but not least important need is to respect your own needs. We are run by volunteer energy. So ask for help when you need it, give what is healthy for you to give, and protect your own mental health and physical well-being. And with that, I will pass us to the topic of tonight, money as a common. And I'll pass the mic to Ed Twohig, and we will be sharing his contact information in the chat. I will spotlight. Yeah.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm glad that everybody's here, and I'll just go ahead with a few comments, 5 or 8 minutes, and then I look forward to being challenged on some of the concepts that I've sent to you in my paper. The academic studies by DeSan and DiMizio and others, together with much discussion and concern over terminology, is interesting stuff. For practical purposes, we need not review the history for much more than my lifetime. I have lived through the Great Depression, World War II, the golden age of our economy, and the 50 years or so, as Joseph Stiglitz terms it, the failed neoliberal experiment. The supremacy of financial interests caused the Great Depression and the World War II. Government creation of money and control of its distribution got us out of the Depression and war and into the golden years of our economy. Advances in technology and production provided income and wealth, which, adjusted through taxation, was distributed fairly justly to all sectors of society, not only to the few. Money was created by government during that time and spent into the private sector for infrastructure and public services. The private sector circulated the money for consumption and investment. Employment and production balanced supply and demand. Money was available for business investment in the growing productive economy and for consumption. Income tax rates of up to 91% of income recognized that a part of any income is enabled by the commons for which government should be paid. It is obvious that the 91% rate did not suppress economic growth during those days. Those were truly the golden years. I am grateful for having been involved in both of the busy and growing government and private sectors. Then, half a century ago, the financial interests, with their think tanks and lobbyists, developed the now failed neoliberal economy. Private sector money creation and taxation reduction delivered economic growth to the few and also brought us recessions and wars again. The financial sector was given the right to create money. It then went to increase prices, not to create value, all which led to food banks, homelessness, two-worker families, and recessions. Now, however, AFJM, AMI, and many others are bringing the true monetary story to the people. My view, and as a basis of my paper, is that every financial transaction between people and or entities creates debt until they are actually paid in money. Interest of money in circulation, instead of money in circulation to eliminate the debt, the government guarantees the debt of the banks to depositors. Less than 5% of such debt is presently eliminated by money. The rest is just debt being circulated. A deposit of debt is not a deposit of money. The only way that the circulation of debt and its harmful aspects can be eliminated is by the creation of money by government. We have organized our society with government action acting for our interests in common. Natural resources, infrastructure, defense, law and order are all in common. What could be more common than the use of money to enable our country to work at all? I believe that government should not provide deposit insurance for debt, but should create all coin, paper, and digital money and provide the optimal amount to the private sector so that depositors have actual sovereign money in their bank account. It should be issued to the private sector first as required to pay government operating and capital expenditure. Second, as direct payment of an amount equal to the poverty line to every citizen. And third, an interest-bearing loans to entities in each private sector as required for our economic stability. I believe that government should remove money from circulation by the maximizing revenues from the value of natural resources and services, our commons, provided by government. And secondly, by fees and taxes levied to encourage social goals. And third, by a graduated tax on total money spent for consumption by each citizen, less a basic exemption equal to the poverty level amount plus wages of an equal amount. All in consideration of the value of the commons necessary to achieve an income. So with that little brief opening, where did I go wrong in my concept? Please let me know. Ready? I know
That
Jeff
was a
is ready.
great intro, and we already have some hands raised for questions. So go ahead, Jeff.
I had. Can you
Good
hear me?
evening, Jeff.
Good evening.
Absolutely. Go it to Matt. Go to it.
Yeah, I love your proposal and everything that you advocate. And you didn't mention anything about the, what we talked about previously. So I'm just going to leave that for now until it comes up, because your actual proposals and everything that you advocate, I support. It basically parallels AFJM and well, not so much, I don't know, the American Monetary Institute, but certainly the Progressive Money Canada. So I'm just going to wait to see what other people say. And if it comes up or you want to expound on it, then we can go further, but I'll just leave it like that for now. Okay?
I'll just add that Jeff and I have been talking back and forth for several years now. And so I think we understand each other quite well. And our differences are differences in that he's more educated and a harder worker than I am. And I deal in concepts and what the man on the street is concerned about. So thanks, Jeff. Maybe it'll come up later.
Okay.
Great commentary. I'm so happy we're all friends. I think it might be useful if I share screen the specific document, and maybe you have, when we look at the points in your document, maybe some additional comments will come up. But I personally really like and agree with all of these key principles on which society should function. So well done, Ed, for writing this up. Especially, I like that it's so, how do I say, intersectional, because like this concept that the basics of life should be available to everybody is a great concept that like we could even connect it to disability justice movement and really get more people to hear the message, because that's how it should work, right, in its functioning society. So I will plop this on the screen and hope that somebody has a thought.
A quick comment on your point there. Most everybody has to have food and enough security to keep them alive. Because I don't think there's even the worst people in our society that likes to see people dying on the streets. And so the thing is that our society is providing that food and whatever comforts they get anyway. The way it should be done is without going to detailed welfare, how much rent is and how much that is. People should have the money at the poverty level, so that section of our society has a functional interest in the society, rather than right now we don't give them much reason to like us or our country at all. Thanks.
Pass it over to Bruce, who's got a thought. And you're muted, Bruce.
There we go. Okay. I was puzzled by the use of you say money as a common, which is an unusual use of the word common. The question I have is common what? Common interest, common, I don't know. It's a trivial question, it seems to me, but I just would like to see how you might answer that.
Okay. I was using the term the commons of the people. There has been much story about the commons, and it goes back to when the land was shared, and the commons, if it wasn't regulated well, they ruin the output of the commons, so that the
Right.
grazing ground. If you
Right.
put too many, and so everything that government does to us, all of these sections, all these things, law and order and our
Right.
military, it's all in common for us as a group of people, as citizens.
Right.
And
So money as a common could be also stated as money as the commons. Is that right?
yeah, money is the common. It's a common because it's something for all people. We need that money in society. We can't. No one person can do away without the use of money.
Well, again, the title itself of your paper, Money as a Common, simply,
Yeah.
okay, you've answered the question, but I was a little tripped up by the abbreviation, if you will, money as a common.
Yeah,
That's all.
it was just a traditional term, common.
Sure, fair enough. Thank you. It's a wonderful paper.
Thank you.
Excellent commentary. I actually have a story that I might add that might be useful, because I've shared the tragedy of the commons
Right.
as a story. I work as a substitute teacher sometimes, and so I've done the lecture about like showing them, here's the pond, you've got the fish. How do you make sure that everybody treats this common in a way that promotes the sustainability of the village nearby that relies on that pond? And automatically, I was explaining this to, I think, fifth graders, and they automatically went to, like, people might overfish this pond because they want more money. They want to sell the fish. So I think the concept of the commons as a resource is one thing that we understand, but the concept of money is just so ingrained in how we see our society. It's just so deep that even like fifth graders were like, people might overfish this because they want more money. And they weren't questioning, like, well, why do they need more money? Why can't we just all have like enough fish? So where I'm going with this is that I agree with Bruce about like the title, the concept of commons is a bit confusing. But I think the clarity of the title and the fact that it's so simple is a really great way to bring this concept to more people. So with that ramble, I'll let you answer, Ed, and then we'll pass the mic over to Young, Kim, and then Jeff again. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I was very much excited and surprised to reading the paper. I found that it was very similar to my own writings in Korean language for last more than 10 years. So it's very great to see you and meet the same thinker here. But I would like to mention or point a couple of things. First, on page 4, digital money in the central bank or treasury is not in circulation. My understanding is that digital money in the central bank or treasury means digital money in treasury means that the digital money in treasury account at the central bank, right? Digital money.
Did I gather that you were saying that the money in the central bank was in circulation?
Not in circulation, you mentioned.
Is that good?
I have some question about that. That money, the
Oh,
digital money in the account of the central bank is as a
yes.
reserve account, yeah? It can be used as for settlement between institutions, like between banks or non-banks. Anybody who
I know.
accounts with the central bank, I guess with the federal, there are more than hundreds institutions have account with the central banks. So
Yes,
and also
I think there
government,
could even,
Treasury has its own account with the central bank. That money can be used as settlement between interbanks. So it
my
is
concept,
the circulations. It
my
itself,
concept, oh, sorry.
yeah, it itself doesn't circulate, but it helps the circulation of the total money in the society. And so that's my concern. And secondly, last sentence on page 7, that Treasury bond or bill, selling or purchasing that is eliminate or increase the circulating money from the market. But when I monitoring or watching the Korean treasury market, the Korean treasury is used as a collateral when they fall behind the minimum the reserve level required. That treasury holding could be used as a collateral for their overdraft and from their reserve account. So if you issue treasury bonds and sell that, auction them to the primary dealers or anybody, it goes immediately to the they can use that as collateral for the cash. So it doesn't absorb the circulating money from the market. It's my observation. And lastly, what I would like to mention is that tax on total consumption, graduated tax on total consumption, annual total consumption of money, or the use of money. How do you calculate that? So
Repeat that.
with the total revenue or income tax, when we report the tax, we do the tax return every year, our total income is calculated by our from the payer or our employer as a payroll provider. They each report to the tax authority, and so they can be cross-checked. So who paid how much to whom, and so the total income could be calculated or be examined by the authorities. But how do you calculate the total consumption, or how do you prove that? It's the question. So it brings to the point that we need a new legislation about the ID. Each person has one cash account, just so the very thorough realignment of the IDs, each personal ID on business identities. It must be defined finally. Yeah, we need to that's a new totally and total new area. So we need to think about. And without that, we cannot calculate or verify the total consumption. Who used how much money for the previous year? It's not easy. Somebody can use money as a lot of money for acting as a agent for somebody else. Most of us are just used for themselves, just for one ID. But there are people acting as a multiple ID, yeah? As an agent. When the JP Morgan died, his money, he has lots of money, but most of the money was not his own. It was from the British, the rich person from the British. I guess I read it in some article. It was more than 75% of his money left behind was from others. Actually, the real owners was somebody else, not his own money. JP Morgan, yeah, who made the Federal Reserve System. Yeah? So that's my comment and concern. And how do you think about that? Thank you.
All right, I'll deal with that last part first, because I'm an accountant and I practiced taxes over the years, and I see very little difference. In fact, it would be much easier to account for the tax received rather than what today is called income. There are so many adjustments now over differences between years, difference between types of income, and so on. It would simplify things considerably if we just said, how much money did you receive? When your employer gives you the slip of your income, it is the amount that he has paid you. And that's the same thing. If you sell a property, that is recorded. And so you have to report that income. But if you don't spend it, if you take your money and put it in savings of some kind, then the difference has to be your consumption. What you received or carried forward from the previous year, less what you have at this end of this year, has to be what you consume. And we're just talking about cash. We're not talking about growth in value or anything, because most of the money over the last 50 years hasn't gone into value. It has gone into increasing prices. And so we would avoid that if we dealt only with cash. If you get the cash and you spend it, that's what we put the graduated tax on. So it would be easier, in my opinion, as an accountant, to simply deal with the cash received and cash paid out than it would be all of these differences in whether accounts receivable is good in 30 days or all these valuations that were tried to put on in order to arrive at a taxable income. So that's why I say that the proper tax base is what people consume, what they take out of society, rather than their income or wages or profits, which is what they put into society. That's the wealth they create versus what they consume. And so they should be paying tax only on what they consume. Okay, so I hope that covered that, my thoughts on that part of it. Your first part was how the central bank transferred money to entities in the private sector. My concept is that they would loan the money to the private sector. It would be almost like calculating reserves in the past. Each day's end, you would know how much cash had been deposited in the account of the agent. And those agents would be the banks or municipal bodies or regional housing development organizations. So you would be able to, instead of the banks loaning money just on the basis of how much profit they could make, the central bank would only loan money in the amount needed in that sector of the economy, and it would go and paid into as a loan, a well-secured loan. The government would have to maintain security and make sure that there was enough equity to back up the loan. For example, they would never loan a bank or anybody more than 50% of their equity, for example, which would provide a good security on the loans that were made. So the money from the central bank would be just a loan to any of the entitled or licensed private sectors. And the private sector would look after the distribution to the allotted money sector as they do at the present time. They would turn around and loan the money just as they do now, except they wouldn't create the money. They would borrow it from we the people who have the power, and it's our common to create the money. And the middle section was dealt with, what did your middle question? You had three there. What was the one in the middle? The middle question that you had the accounts from the central bank.
Government debt can be used as a collateral for cash shortage.
Government debt, in my view, should only be created as a medium to withdraw money from circulation. If you want to cool down your economy, it's just, you can issue government debt. And that is simply to take cash, providing we're providing cash 100% from the government. The sale of securities, government securities, only serves to suck money back out to cool down the economy. And then if you want to warm it up again, you buy those again. If you have no debt outstanding, if the government
was also my own observation or understanding, but recently I start to think of questioning about that, because I found that the Korean government, if you go to the bank to borrow money to buy a house, there is a limit to how much the value, loan to value regulations. Yes, so you cannot borrow to buy, say, 100 million to buy a $50 million house. Yeah, okay. But the government fund, the allowed collateral ratio is over 100% actually in Korea. And Korea Central Bank allows the institutions just okay if you can keep just 75% of the cash shortage as government bond, we will accept that. It's actually the loan to value ratio is over 100%. So that's why that's the reason I think the long-term government bonds is high, price is higher. The yield curve is, decreasing. The normal yield curve is going upside, but these days it's turned to downside. In Korea, especially, the government bond is very much preferred by the banks or the institution, anybody who wants to government money. So use the government the cash as a, they can provide the less government bond collateral, so they can borrow more money from.
Well, perhaps they should be reading my paper.
Anyhow, yeah.
I would highly recommend that to them, yes. Excellent. Well, we all got some more context out of what's going on in Korea. Thank you for sharing your questions. We'll pass it to Jeff.
Yeah, I want to first say, kind of in defense of Ed's title, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think his meaning for the commons is money as a public utility. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, especially based on conversations that we've had and the context of the paper. So would you basically agree with that, Ed?
Yes, well, a public utility is a common.
Yeah.
It's just by nature, it's
Yeah.
ours. It's ours as citizens. So yes, you're right.
Yeah, so I like the title. But young Kim actually touched on what I have a problem with is the sort of your current understanding of the system. And I also have some additional stuff that I could add about money creation when securities are first issued, because in my research I've just done recently, I can provide actual proof with data that shows that new money is created when securities are initially issued from the government. So the thing I had issue with was on page 4, where you said collection of taxes, fees, pension premiums, and the creation of government debt remove digital money from circulation. The effect is tantamount to destroying money since it is removed from the private sector. And this is where I disagree, based on my own data collection and also statements from the Department of Finance. So basically the way it works is taxes are collected, they're put into the Consolidated Revenue Fund, which is the government's account at the central bank. And whenever they do that, the dollar amount goes up. The money is not destroyed. And then very soon after, the government withdraws from that fund for spending. So I'd like you to comment on that.
Well,
Yeah,
Jeff, you're right. You're always right. But here's the point. I don't care a tack about the system as it is today. I say the system today is what we all want to change. We want to get rid of these archaic things that have developed over the century and come down to a simple thing. The government creates the money and puts it into the system as necessary to maintain the economy and keep us all healthy and well fed. And what I certainly understand exactly what you say, but to me, that's history. I want the future, not the present. Sorry about that.
Okay, no, I
But
understand.
we both
I'm just-
agree. But
Yeah, okay.
we're
So
looking
that
at it. We're looking at it with different glasses.
Sure. So this was the confusing part to me, because then, excuse me, later on in page 7, you basically vindicate yourself when you say, this is, of course, when there's some change or whatever has been established in the new system. But then you say taxation, fees, and other payments to the government decrease the amount of money in circulation until the government turns around and spends it for the public good, which is basically the same thing that I say. So it's
I
just
was trying.
interesting.
I had a purpose there, and my purpose was to try and present little variations along the same sort of theme. So, you know, I don't challenge you on what you say at all, but we're talking about a little different things. And if I said it a little different in 2 different places, it wasn't intention to have any difference in my basic concept.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would like
well-
to join the discussion about. I agree with Jeff that money should be the public goods. Yeah, public goods. Really, the economy consists of 2 big sectors: the public sectors and the private sector. So, the public goods contain the money creation because it should be provided by the government. provided for the government, and then it should be a public good. So I think previously it has been a question about the tragedy of common. So I think in this case, tragedy of common is, I think it should be different. We cannot interpret so that money is including to the tragedy of commons, because the common is, there is such a use who has been overcrowded, for example. So it comes to a tragedy of common. But money, I think it should be as public goods, and it should be created by the government. It has been, I think, the purpose of the paper by Ed. So in this case, it could be something confusion between public goods and commons. So it might be more clarification on that. I'm sorry, I am late because of time. So I didn't hear it before. So it could be there is a differentiation between money as common and money as public goods. But public goods should be created by the government, while common usually it has been available in the nature. So in this case, there should be a clear clarification. What should be considered as, is it okay to say that money is common goods? Because as if we see, for example, the previous understanding of common goods is it has been created by nature. So if you can give a clarification, so I support, for example, that money is public goods as Jeff. Thank you.
Action, can I answer that, Ed?
Yes.
Shortly,
Yes.
because we do have a lot of other hands up, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, but just short, I'll be brief. Yeah, so this is what we're advocating, and same with the Alliance for Just Money. And then Ed's paper is actually consistent with it, that we want the central bank to create all the money and spend it into existence. And so that is the common good. So I'll leave it at that.
Precisely. Well said. I think we've gotten to the common agreement that the title has its utility as defining money as a thing that we should all share and everybody should have access to, and it should be moderated by the government and created for public good. We've reached that agreement. I wonder if we're going to be discussing more of the points at the end of the paper, or I'll just let and encourage other people to raise their hands as well. I'd like to see some ladies raise their hands, but we've got Bruce and Mark and Mike on the mic list. So go ahead. Once again, Bruce.
There's a sentence where you say, indeed, only the national government has the power to create money, whether it's coin, paper, or digital currency. But this is not an issue of disagreement. It's an issue of getting clarification. So, and then you say, and to control the issue of credit, which is the ability to incur debt that must be converted to money as the medium of exchange. And so we're talking about the government controlling credit, controlling the ability to incur debt, if I understand that. I'm not sure I understand the whole point. I mean, the initial sentence, only the national government has the power to create money, that's crystal clear. The rest of it has got me confused.
Okay. The government has fallen down the last 50 years in that they have not exercised any control over the creation of debt. For example, they have allowed debt to be created only to blow up prices, and the money has gone into creating bubbles and this sort of things.
Right.
Where if the government was properly controlling debt, they would try to make sure that the money was going into the areas that are most useful. And also in credit, the government has the responsibility to protect people from debt of various kinds. And they haven't done that. They have made so many people that our private bankruptcy rates have increased terribly over the last 50 years because there has been very little control over how credit is being allowed to be issued by all the different outlets in the world,
Right,
in the country.
right. I got that. And so would it be accurate to say that and to control the issue of credit within society, within the society itself, or among the commons, among the people? That's in other words, that the point of this is that the government should be controlling, as you said, controlling not the government's debt, but controlling the debt of society.
Exactly, yes.
Okay,
yes.
good. Thank you. Thank you.
My proposal is there is no government debt unless it's necessary to issue bonds to get money out of the circulation.
Thank you. Perfect.
All right, we'll pass the mic to Mark Young.
Hello. I hope I'm popping up. Hey, enjoyed your paper very much.
Thank
I
you.
love how concise it was. Brevity is the common man's. I like that. I like that very much. The other thing I like that you just said is that I like the fact that your paper is forward-looking. It doesn't try to reanalyze the current system. And some people may know that one of my favorite analogies is that there's no need of talking about how a combustion engine works when you're trying to change to an electric. You need to focus on the electric engine, not the combustion engine. So with that, I do have a couple of questions. One, wouldn't a sales tax be considered a consumption tax? And that was for I know there was a question about from Young Kim regarding how would you calculate it? It seems to me that a consumption tax would just be a sales tax, and that the sales tax could then be adjusted based on category or item to talk about the progressive benefit of a taxation policy that you kind of described in the paper also. And that's the first question. Is a sales tax comparable to a consumption tax? And then the next question is, how does your commons system or philosophy trickle down to the state level? And so is this just a federal thing, or do you expect, since states collect taxes also, right? And so is the thought process that states would then be, because I know in the AMA and the NEED Act, states get like 25% of newly created money. And so my thought process is, how does this go down to is this just a centralized system, or is it decentralized to the states? Any thoughts you have on that? Thanks.
Okay, sales tax first. Sales tax, to me, point of sales tax is probably the most regressive tax that they could have ever put on to people, because what we're doing, we're collecting tax from the poorest of people, and also we are collecting tax and influence the purchase decision of many people, in that they are paying taxes and it influences them on whether they buy maybe fuel or food. And so the sales tax itself, to me, you would, if you do away with the sales tax and start off and put the sales tax on a graduated basis so that it keeps increasing in rate, the same as it does with the present income tax. So that, to me, is fairer among people. So those that are eating sirloin steak instead of hamburger, or wearing sneakers instead of decent shoes, you know, it's we should be doing away with that tax, which I believe is a very unfair and unnecessary and complicated to collect tax. If we did away with that and had simply a consumption tax based on the total consumption, no matter what you choose to spend your money on, you are going to be paying your rate based on the bracket that you're in. So sales tax, to me, I think should go. And then you mentioned the, what was it, the second one?
How to implement the change in a state level. Did I get that right?
Oh, state taxes, no.
How
I
does- how does-
mentioned in my report there that, to me, I was talking strictly on the level of a government that could create money. And if the states are not allowed to create money, then they're in a different position because they are really part of the private sector, the same as the rest of the people in the private sector. But the principles, I think, are the same for state, and state would very well be better off if they took the same approach of taxing people on what they took out of society, of the wealth they just consumed, that they destroyed, the wealth they destroyed, rather than what people create. Because when we tax income and wages and so on, that goes directly into the cost of our production. And that's not where we should be collecting our taxes. And I mentioned in there several places, and I want to bring it up. It's the imports. How in the devil do we let imports come in and they don't pay the same 35% of our gross domestic product as our locally produced goods and services are? To me, it's absolutely ridiculous not to put that same 35% or whatever, roughly, onto each import, because the imports are setting the prices for our local production, as well as bringing their goods in without taking the same responsibility for our society. If we tax everything on the basis of consumption, then imports would be bearing the same tax as locally produced products. And if you wanted to add another import tax to support our economy, the same as we did for 100 and more years, then that's another thing that should be looked at by our legislators. I went too far, sorry.
No, you didn't. I would just to comment right back is to say that I don't know if it's semantics or not, but I'm still a little confused on the consumption via the sales tax and what the actual difference would be, except for that I think you're saying that based on your income, your sales tax may be higher because sales tax still captures what you're consuming. So I think that's the difference, but I'm still not quite certain of it yet. So I'll leave it at that though. That's fine.
Let me add one other point that I look at, and I say what a person earns, their income, however they get it and wherever they get it, they don't get that income by the sweat of their brow. They get that income by using all the research and development that we have developed in our country for the last hundreds of years. They use their education. That they couldn't get their income if we hadn't developed the education systems we have, bad as they might be in some cases. And all of the law and order we've set up, the highways we've produced, all of those things. And the thing is that people, income should, a good part of that income should go back to pay for the commons that people use, because that's how they get that big income. That 91% that was back in the 60s, that was a reasonable tax. When you went up over 10 million or whatever it was at that date, that was a reasonable tax, because the people making that 10 million, most of it came because of the country they were living in and the society and the economy we had. So, people should be paying government, us, the rest of us, for what we've provided that enables them to make that money. Just the market we've given them. Anyway, sorry about that. I got off on a tangent.
Understood. The final comment, though, is that I think also that states actually also produce for the common, right? So states provide parks, like you said, fire protection, streets, sidewalks, all that stuff. You know, while I have no issue necessarily with increasing taxation on the wealthy, if you're given the ability of the government and the commons to create money for the benefit of the commons, will you need all that taxation, or is it just punitive at that point because somebody is rich? But I also think that there has to be a stronger allocation to the states to use federally created funding to provide for the commons that they're responsible for, because those things aren't profitable either. I mean, it's never profitable to repave a street or redo a park. You know, you may have some fees, but that kind of defeats the purpose of an open park. But so that was my comment, that I do think there needs to be more thought given to the state aspect of it.
I do a comeback and say that it could be like it. I don't know how we define profitable, but like there have been studies that there's economic benefits of like trees being planted and stuff like that. So that stuff should be like subsidized and implemented in real life.
Oh, no question about it. I think my point was that you shouldn't make states just rely on taxation. Also, many of the things they do are not proper. Yeah, you can, if you have a beautiful natural park, there are, I think, both tangible and intangible benefits that can go with things like that. So some of them may be more environmental, not necessarily money. But if you maintain a beautiful state park and you can charge to get in it, so that's fine too. I think my point is just that I think we talk on a federal level so much and we just leave states out of it. And this is a large country. So, you know, you don't want all those sources to be so far away that now states are left filling gaps through taxation. And then you end up with the same arguments and debate that you have at the national level about how do we fund priorities. And then you'll have that at the state level that much more. So all those states and cities also, for that matter, it all comes down locally. So that was all.
Excellent thought process. I do wonder that myself in advocating for the AMRA as it is now, and like if we can do a local, I get nervous when you spotlight me, damn it. When you can do a local proposition and then the city realizes that, oh, we can actually create our own money in theory, like how would that translate to the federal level? It's super complicated. I'll let someone take the mic.
So much for the welcome and for holding this space. It's a really inspiring thing to know that there are this many minds on thinking about how to ethically, safely, carefully make monetary reform happen when so much stems from just systemic issues that individuals don't have leverage to escape, or even entire charitable systems don't have leverage to escape and remedy. So really grateful for the chance to come listen and participate.
And maybe we'll have you on as a speaker sometime, because your article was absolutely genius as well.
Oh, thank you so
Alex.
much. Thank you so much.
If I can make sense of my tabs, I will try to share the link to your article, Alex, but please do like bomb the chat with all your resources. They are amazing resources.
Well, what was the article about, if I could ask?
I'm working on ideating community-led tools for, in particular, using alternative currency strategies, specifically to design just customizable communities, self-determined tools for allocating value where it needs to be in a voluntary and participatory way, and looking at ways to design those specifically to guarantee a basic financial right to well-being and to ecological survival. So that's the general umbrella field of where that
Very
work is.
interesting.
I'm back in
Ed
again.
is back. We can hear you, Ed.
I'm sorry,
Hooray.
I'm too old for these damn machines.
But you're here again, so welcome.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
We are patient and welcoming of all. And we were on the question of states. Do you want to keep talking about that, Mark? Or should we move on to the next question and topic?
Oh, you can feel free to move on.
All right, let's pass it to Mike.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Ed. Thank you for the paper. I believe that it is in complete alignment with monetary reform objectives. I did have a few questions for you. So first question is, did C.H. Douglas' theory of social credit and his notion of cultural heritage factor into your paper at all?
No, not really. I have read back on some of the organization that he set up, and he had some smart ideas there. I don't recall what the heritage part of it is that you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's very similar to your notion of the commons or the public good. The cultural heritage of a community consists of all of the human and natural resources that exist within that community. And money can be thought of as a representation of that cultural heritage. And, you know, you can ascribe value to resources that are still, say, in the ground or still available. And so that has a monetary value. And then if it's extracted, you know, that has a monetary value. And so I believe it's a way of kind of quantifying the value of the commons or, you know, the cultural heritage.
Yeah, yes, I understand and certainly agree with it. I was after I informed the NDP and quoted from some of their original papers that said you've gone astray the last few years. They've lost a lot of their I don't know, concepts, I think.
Yeah, well, I think it's very important that, you know, we have these kind of theoretical objectives. But one of the other things that could be done here is, have you considered trying to put some numbers to your proposals in terms of revenue and, you know, inflow and outflow of cash to the government? Because maintaining, you know, obviously maintaining your spreadsheet and accounting for all of the economic activity, I think that is in scope of what the government should be doing. So have you thought to putting numbers to any of your proposals in terms of money inflow and outflow?
Internet is unstable, it says.
We hear you fine.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Did you hear Mike's question?
I didn't hear the last one, no.
Can you just repeat the last?
Sure, yeah. So have you thought of putting numbers to your proposals that you listed?
No, no. Once the concept is considered, then you put numbers, but I can't see any difference. The government is going to carry out a program and they're going to require so much money, and we need so much money in the private sector. And the only thing that limits the amount of money is how hot the economy is. We can't have more money than we can produce. And what's happening now, we're putting more money in than we're putting into production, and it's going into blow up balloons and cause all kinds of problems, because it's money that's not going for value, it's going for price. So no, I haven't, but I can't see any difference in the actual cost of running the country or the cost of feeding the populace.
Understood. Well, great paper, Ed. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Looks like we have Joe next. Joe Polito.
Unmute, Joe.
Unmute.
Thank you. Hello,
Hello.
Ed. I quite enjoyed your presentation, and I'm sure I'll enjoy your paper. I was wondering what your influences have been. We have Comer in Canada, that's been around for a long time. Was that an influence? Was Saudi an influence? How did you get all this, synthesize all this knowledge?
Let me go back 50 some years when I was with an accounting firm. I was in the consulting branch, but I was at a cocktail party and a fellow a bit in his cups was berating my company for preparing the tax returns of his neighbor. And his neighbor, he slurred to say, was we were making a mistake because he was taking home less money than I am. And I know he paid more taxes. So I said, well, what's your neighbor do? Well, he's got a little business. And I said, how's he doing? Oh, great, he's growing all the time. And I said, well, you know that he has to pay tax on the money that he has to put into inventory and the tax that he has to put into accounts receivable, and the new employees that he hires takes money before he gets it back. And he said, that's the craziest thing I ever heard. And so that was when I first wrote an article for our professional paper across the country, and pointing out the fact that, you know, this income tax thing is stupid because we shouldn't be taxing income. We should be taxing what the guy takes home and spends. So that's been in my mind for 50 some years. And when I retired and had the time to do some research, it went from one thing to another. I was looking at the tax thing, and then I tied into, and I took some university courses in economics online, and started reading some books on economics and so on. And so that's what happened, and that's where the ideas came from. But that was the seed that really told me how bad, because I practiced tax. I loved it. It was a game, and it was a great game, and I was really good at it. But I kind of sickened that we weren't really doing sensible taxation. So that's where it all came from.
That's really interesting. But what about the side of the money becoming a common, so the common, where you would have the banks borrowing the money from, I guess, the central bank or whatever. All the money you were saying would come from the government side of things as opposed to the private side.
That's right. I looked at it and I saw people that borrow money. The people who borrow money from the banks are the ones that have got money. The banks want security and so on. And so they don't take much chance on the small business guy. There's they don't look at how hard a worker is. In the olden days, before the financiers, back in the Depression days, when my father went into the bank, they looked at him and they loaned the money to him and decided he was poor as a church mouse, but he was struggling to make a living through the Depression. And when he needed a little bit of money, he could borrow a little bit of money because it wasn't, they loaned, but now they don't loan. They give the money to somebody who's already got money, and that they use it to make more money. So in effect, they are paying nothing for the use of the money. They pay the banks for their risk. They pay their banks for the overhead. They pay the banks for the profit, but they don't pay anything for the money. You know, if we're in this country together, that money should be created for all of us equally. If the government creates it and spends it, they spend it equally for us. This is all theoretical, of course, but I think it's right to a large extent. So the thing is that we've been giving people free money. It's worth something.
Yep.
And why aren't we getting what it's worth? I'm one of a citizen. It's my money. I want to get something for what you use that I don't get to use. Anyway, sorry about that.
Well, I'm just amazed you've worked it all out yourself. It doesn't seem like you've had any real influences other than your own analysis and experience. Most impressive. Thanks very much.
Well, I didn't quite finish graduate high school, and I never did get to university, but I did a lot of reading and studying, so I keep up on the stuff.
You know what? One of our members, one of his inspirations is Frederick Soddy, who was a Nobel Prize winner in hard sciences. And he turned his mind to these things. And like you, he just worked it out on his own. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Let's pass the mic to Alex.
I do think Jeff had his hand up prior to me. I'm wondering if you're tagging on.
You get first time priority.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I am really curious about your insights and anyone in the group who might have insights specifically around the realm of providing a financial right to basic well-being. It sounds like you're recommending specifically a universal basic income or something parallel to that. And one thing that I've mathematically struggled with over and over, and I'd love any ideas, solutions, perspectives that you've come across, is the challenge of a universal basic income increasing buying demand, then increasing prices, then increasing the size that the universal basic income has to be. And if you've come up with ways to stabilize that, I mean, that's one of the big puzzle pieces that I've been trying to tackle through alternative and complementary currencies that have their own separate properties specifically for approaching that. But if there's a way to do that with the US dollar, that would be a no-brainer, much simpler, easier route to go to.
Okay, I do believe in the basic income paid to everybody because I don't think it's right to pay to try and pay some people and not others. We should share this equally to start with. We'll take it back again by taxing the people on whatever we tax them on unequally. So people in the high brackets pay a high rate, and so they might only be getting 17% of what the person who's not paying any tax. So it evens out that way. It's the amount that people spend will still always be the same. Some people will spend every penny they can get their hands on, and others will try to save some. And then we can make people save some by taking money back for pensions and all that. But incomes will never be equal, but there should be some starting point where they're equal. And so I don't think it would make any difference in what people spend. And we've had the experiments. I've gone to the meetings and listened to the people who have been on basic income, and they don't spend any more. They spend it better, and they, to me, there's all kinds of advantages for it because people are going to eat and have some semblance of support anyway. So let's make it easy and then even it out with our tax regime afterwards.
Absolutely, absolutely, to there being that basic right, that minimum level, that security, that access to the market. I think my curiosity comes in specifically on the market side, where if you've got housing production, for example, it's considered to have been overbuilt generally when there's enough that's been produced for the price to meet what people have to spend. Whereas by underproducing higher paying, it tends to be people can make more as producers for equivalent work when there isn't enough to meet everybody's needs. And I really want to tackle how to facilitate either market reform or non-market solutions that provide guaranteed access, while puzzling out if it is possible to just stabilize the minimum price of survival to stabilize the poverty line. A universal basic income seems super on point. Does that make sense where my question is positioned in that puzzle?
Yes, it does make sense. And the housing has been so ridiculous in that it's the money that's available that has increased these increasing prices for the real estate. It hasn't been any value. It's just been increased price because the money was available. And so that is one factor. And the other thing about the housing that bothers me is that we are bringing in foreign investment, and they bring in their US dollars and change them, and we have to print or get Canadian dollars for those US, and then we spend the US dollars to buy toys from China. And then for the next 80 or 100 years, we pay back the money to the foreign investors in real estate. And just makes ridiculous, no sense to me to bring in foreign money to, we might as well create the money in Canada and pay it to Canadians to build the houses rather than have somebody bring in US dollars and buy the Canadian dollars and use it to pay Canadians to build it with. We've got to make the money, Canadian money, available anyway. So what do we need the foreign investors in real estate for?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well said. You definitely got my wheels turning, and oof, I don't know if we'll ever know the answers to that. So I will pass the mic again to who was next? Jeff, you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go next. This is actually kind of in response to Mark when he said that, he's tired of looking at the current system, and Ed's paper is very forward-looking, but I would disagree and say that it's paramount to understand the current system if we're making recommendations for change. And one thing Ed said too, which kind of goes to a proposal I just sent to Ryan, that I want to do a coffee house on how the current system actually works. So I've uncovered some data that supports, in fact, it's indisputable, that when new securities are issued from the government, that's in the primary market, new money is created. And I can demonstrate this mathematically and anybody can understand it, but I'm not going to tell you how I do it because it's going to be like a teaser. So that's very important. So that's on top of documentation from the Parliamentary Library of Canada that supports what I'm saying, and also publications from like Modernizing Money and Where Does Money Come From? They say the same thing, but they don't actually provide a mathematical or any kind of graphical representation of how that actually works. And I will do that if I'm allowed to speak at a coffee house again.
Of course you will be.
Great. I raised my own hand because I have a comeback that I just watched this TED Talk today about trial, error, and the God complex. And the gist of it is that there are these complicated problems in the world. We won't really ever understand how it works in its entirety. We have to just embrace trial and error sometimes. And right now is a real crisis, like a multitude of crises going on. And we could, try some stuff like universal basic income. And if it ends up leading to inflation, we'll just readjust the money like they have done in the past. Like in Mexico, for example, the equivalency of the dollar used to be like, well, right now it's 20. It used to be like 200. So they've done like the switching the math around and suddenly your dollars are just a different equivalency. And it's that kind of thing that's going to end up happening. It's kind of all imaginary money anyway. If it's been created through debt and this process of you borrow something because you have a great asset, like, and then you have the right to get more money borrowed, and it's creating money like that. So we're just gonna have to try some stuff, guys. And I think that's the gist of what I love about this group. And I kind of get really frustrated when we get into this nitty gritty of like, how is it currently working? My lingering question that I did have for Ed, besides my thoughts on that we just need to try something now, is like in your messaging, which is very concise and simple and a great article. I have a note that you quoted from each according to their ability to each according to their need. Now, who can tell me who said that? Because it wasn't as referenced in the article, but that is a Karl Marx quote. So my question to you, Ed, is if you've utilized that quote in public spaces, have your messages been perceived in a way of like you're leaning on the left or you're on the right? I don't know where you land politically speaking, but I love your ideas. But how do you suggest presenting these ideas so that they do move forward?
I can say that another way. Don't be lazy and eat well. You know, it's just, I think
Yeah,
everybody I've been a worker, and almost everybody that I've known have been workers. There are a few that don't like to work. Yeah, well, we can put up with them, but everybody should work the best of their ability because they enjoy it and it helps them and it helps their fellow citizens. And I don't want to see anybody starving on the street like I'm seeing in these days. And so everybody should have their needs. Now, some needs are more than others. You know, some people are satisfied. The guy on the street is satisfied with a warm meal and a bed. But some guys need to have a private jet, for example. That's all right. That may be his need. But anyway, as I say, it's just work and live. That's it.
Thanks, Ed. We'll keep working hard and trying to get this to fulfill everybody's needs, hopefully. Let's pass it to Mark again.
Hey, this response was actually in response to Alex and his question. I think you bring up a very good point when you talk about the push-pull, particularly on price stability, and if a UBI is provided, would that cause people to go out and buy more and push up prices and stuff like that? I mean, that's a valid concern, and I think it's something that will be brought up as we move forward with monetary reform. So it is something that we definitely need to discuss. I would say, to answer your question specifically, though, is that I think you have to figure in a couple of things. Is that one would be that a lot of what lower income Americans do to get to that, I think that price stability, quality of life level you're talking about as far as the income and what does it take to live a certain quality of life. I think that the way people provide for that now is through a lot of debt, right? And so what a UBI can do is then provide that to them so that it's a source of equity. So either way, whether it's debt or equity, that money is still going into the economy. So that will offset some of your concerns. I think the other part is that whether or not you're doing an actual UBI or a job guarantee. I think a UBI could be useful in certain instances, and I think a job guarantee could be useful in certain instances. But even with that, you have to then think about how do you, if it's a job guarantee, are you getting that quality of life by doing a job guarantee plus a UBI, or are you also doing it from a standpoint of, I'm going to increase the minimum wage? So let's say it's, 35,000 or 40, whatever that quality of life standard is. And so all those things will offset that potential for inflation that you're talking about and pushing prices up. And I think the last thing I would add is that there may actually have to be a resetting, or I think you used the term stabilization. There may actually have to be a resetting to get your productive value at the bottom if you do it in a clean way. Prices may have to go up to some degree if your desire in society is to pay everybody a living wage where they have a certain quality of life. And with that, I think if in the future, let's say the price of milk goes up to $4 a gallon, because that's what it takes to make the lowest worker have a certain quality of life. It just pushes that cost up to a degree. And so I think those are things we have to struggle with and figure out. I think there's plenty of modeling that could be done so that you make the best decision possible. But I want to give you an answer to your question that was a little more detailed, because I thought it was a good question.
I like that comment. $4 a gallon for milk. What are we paying now in Canada? About $8 a gallon. So, supply and demand.
I obviously don't buy a lot of milk. So.
Well, that's it. We buy the milk, but supply and demand. This increased money in the system, I don't think. There might be more consumption, and what our concern is with consumption is that all consumption takes energy, and energy is what's killing the planet. So generally, we're over consuming anyway, and what we have to try to do is bring that consumption down, and that's another reason that I think the taxation should be on consumption and not on production. And what's causing our present inflation, of course, is supply side, not the demand side. So anyway, that's what I got to say on that.
One comment back is that I do think that when you say that we need to switch from an income tax to a consumption tax, I don't disagree with you at all. I would say that, but once you go down to the state level, there already is a consumption tax, which is called a sales tax. And so even though we don't have a national sales tax here, we do have one at the state level. And so people are actually paying on what they consume to a certain degree.
It's still unjust at the state level, it's same as it would be at the federal level. Point of sale tax is not a just tax.
Very confusing topic. Okay, we've got about 30 minutes left to keep chatting. I will pass the mic to Young Kim if you have an actual question for our speaker of the night, and then we will go ahead and do like closing thoughts for everybody to get a chance to take the mic. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm talking about regarding taxation. I support the land value taxation by the Haley George. I wonder how the Alliance for Just Money fits with this idea. I know that some of our members here support that idea, and also the land ownership. Land ownership should be only allowed to each individual or family or community or the nation itself, not to any private corporations or any foundation like for our Rockefeller Foundation. So we need to set the basic principle for land ownership and then land value taxation. If we can promote that idea nationally and apply that, implement that, it will be great for the reducing or eliminating all other income tax also. And also, second idea is that about 2007, year of 2007, I wrote an article in Korean community that the idea of taxation on source deduction tax on financial gains. Financial gains means any amount of money taken out from a specific account in excess of the money put into that same account. Each account, so the actual taxation should be deferred until the withdrawn money is exceed from the deposit money. From that point, the real taxation starts. So if you get the financial gain, you have to pay the source deduction. The financial institutes has been mandatory to collect that source deduction tax as the employer, as the payroll tax, same as payroll tax. The financial gains should be taxed on. Whenever you pay out, you have to calculate it, how much money was put into this account and how much accumulated money was taken out from this account. And that from taken out money exceeds from the input money. From that point, the taxation starts. The tax rate should be the average tax rate, or the national tax rate. It will be very easy considering this IT technology. It's very easy. So still, I don't have much support for my own idea from even in Korean community. But I just would like to mention that that's a very close relationship with the as the idea for the total consumption taxation, because it's focusing on the specific account, or money account.
Yeah. Land tax. I haven't given a lot of thought to land tax. A lot of our houses are owned with the land by a person, and of course the corporations now have been gobbling up all the houses and so on, and turning them into rental houses, into the rentier. But I don't. We do pay property tax to support our municipal expenditures, and that seems to be working reasonably well. The problem, of course, is that the land value goes up because of what the taxpayers are putting into a new street or improving the area or whatever it is. So there is not a good deal of fairness in our land tax as it is, but as I say, I haven't given much thought to it. And then you mentioned tax on
Financial gains.
financial gains. Okay. If a security is sold, that tax, that money that's received for that security is money received. And you can either spend it on which you will be taxed a consumption tax,
Not taxation.
or you can reinvest it in which you would not be taxed on it.
Yeah, until you withdraw money, actual cash from that your security account or real estate trust account or any kind of financial account, there's the accumulated amount will be calculated by computer. How much money was put into the account and how much money was taken out from that account.
Cash in, cash out. That's recorded. And if you get the cash, also what some people don't realize, that my concept is that if you borrow money, that is money you've received. And unless you invest that money or save that money, then you will be taxed on what you borrow as part of your consumption. So that, to me, it's always been a very unfair thing. The guy who was drinking at the cocktail party, he should also be looking at his neighbors who borrowed $20,000 and spent $20,000 more than him and are paying no tax, not as much tax as he is. So it's cash in and cash out, I believe, is the simplest and best way of looking at any transactions. And when you get to talk about securities, I look at the financial community, and most people might not accept that it is just a cost area of our society. It is not a productive of anything of any value whatsoever. It is simply all a cost area. And so to have finances, our financial sector, getting away with such things as not taxing capital gains and so on is probably the worst disgrace of the whole financial dishonesty of the last 50 years. Anyway, I don't know whether I answered any questions or not.
And let's pass the mic to John Howell. Very excited to hear your question, John.
Well, thanks, Ed, for your paper and your presentation. And I think all of us share this concern about sort of economic justice and the how unjust the current system is. And that's what we would like to fix. One of the ways of looking at that is we have a problem with concentration of wealth. And so many factors essentially contribute to this flow of money from the many to the few, which results in this enormous concentration of wealth that has reached extreme proportions. And it's pretty clear that you can't have democracy when you have this kind of concentration of wealth. Justice Brandeis said it very clearly. He said, well, we can have democracy in this country, or we can have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me there are three fundamental processes that are most guilty of this. And I'm no economist, so this is an amateur looking at this. But we have the marketplace, which is a place where a whole lot of concentration of wealth takes place because of the ability of corporations to set prices through their monopolistic control of the market. So the marketplace has lots of distortions that cause this concentration of wealth. Oxfam currently estimates that it's the marketplace that is responsible for 50% of this concentration of wealth. But two other factors come in, and one is taxation, the regressive taxation system that we have, and we've talked about that a lot tonight. And the third, of course, is what we all focus on, and that is the monetary system itself. So these three processes are the processes that produce this concentration of wealth. And I think this discussion has been interesting tonight because it's emphasized the fact that maybe it's not enough for us to just concentrate on monetary reform, because that's only part of this problem. And we've talked a lot about taxes tonight. That's another part of the problem. And the marketplace itself is part of that problem. So as we focus on monetary reform, because that's where a lot of us who are involved with this feel we have some expertise. But these other areas are vital too, in terms of solving this problem of this concentration of wealth that makes democracy impossible.
Okay, I have a comment on wealth. And I did not mention this in my paper, and because it is a more controversial one. But if you take my idea that money, the use of money is of value, and you say, I say that I want the government on our behalf to charge for the use of our money. If I get some of our money, your money, and I invest it or put it in the bank, my bank account, or buy something with it, I'm still using that money. I should be still paying for the use of that money because I have put that money into an investment that's making me money. I should be paying you for that money because I'm still using that money. So what that entails in reality is a wealth tax, because we're taxing not on some fictitious value. We're charging tax for the use of money. And I'm still using that money because I have bought things with it that I haven't consumed. If I consume it, I'm going to pay a consumption tax. But if I save it, I'm still using that money. So I still should be paying that 4% or 6% per annum or whatever we're going to charge to the private sector for the public sector providing the money. So that will go on. So that comes out to be in reality a kind of charge for the use of money. The people will say, oh, it's just a wealth tax. It's not a wealth tax. It is a tax because you are still using that money that we let you have. You put it into this, and so you still have the money. Okay? So wealth tax or a payment for the value of the use of money. What's your opinion on that?
Well, let me just say this. I'm not sure about that mechanism and how that mechanism would work, but I understand the sort of general impetus of what you're saying. But focusing on taxes, of course, is redistribution of wealth. Focusing on monetary reform focuses on the initial distribution of wealth, well, where the money goes when it's created. And that's an important aspect of it too. And that's why sort of monetary reform and tax reform, I think both are needed in thinking about achieving the kind of world that we want to achieve. And we also think about this really tough problem of the concentration of wealth that takes place in the marketplace through market mechanisms of such things as corporate monopolization and things like this. So those are important factors as well.
Yes, absolutely. The monopoly money, the rentier money, that is really a fall down on the part of our governing people to let that sort of thing happen. But your opinion, are they still using the money? Are they still using our money? They have taken their money and they have put it into their bank account. They're still using it. Is that right or wrong? They've bought some securities with it. Are they still using our money? Yours and mine. We've put it into circulation and they're using it.
Sure, they're using it. We all use money in a lot of different ways, and in a sense, saving it is a way it's used. The way the system works, sort of.
They didn't consume it, so they must still have it.
Well,
they've converted it into copper or gold or whatever, but they still have. You're still using our money.
Yeah.
If they consumed it, we would probably charge them 91% for their consumption. But if they only keep it and use it, we're going to charge them the 6% per year because they're making 14% on it. We should get something for the money that they're using.
Well, you're a better accountant than I am, so I'll let you take the lead on that. But let me say one other thing, and that is this business, and this came up in the discussion tonight too, this question about centralization or decentralization of the process of allocation of money. because you can make an argument that if this is highly centralized in a government, local needs may not be well served at all. So although you have to have a national system for a uniform currency, and I think we all agree that the source of that currency should come from government creation of money and not private creation of money. But as far as its allocation process, I think it's really important to figure out how that can be done in part through local input and not simply done centrally. I think Richard Warner has, talked about this in his arguments, and he shows historical examples of how the central allocation of money has not worked well. And of course, he argues for this German system of many small banks, community banks, and so on. But the simple point is there has to be a local component, a strong local component in terms of whatever system one proposes for the allocation of government created money. So there has to be a central component and there has to be a local component.
The central component is to provide money to the sector. Now, we had savings and loans in the past, and the savings and loans companies were mostly local, and they were financing local real estate, and some of them got financing local business and so on. Those were all gobbled up by the central ones, the big banks. And so that's what we have to go back to, and that's why the central distribution controls should only control the sectors. For example, you put the money into the companies that are loaning for real estate, but you say to them, you're not going to loan this money to buy securities the sixth time that they were sold. There's still, it doesn't put any money back into the real economy when you buy a security, because the money's already in the company. So you're adding nothing of value to the economy when you simply pay more for a share of stock. And so what's caused all our troubles is the fact that the banks have put it into blowing up asset prices, not their values. So anyway, I say you charge for the use of our money. However long you use it, baby, it's our money. Just pay us some segment of the money you're making with it. And if you're not making any money with it, if you put it in a castle, okay, you're still paying us for our money. Although you're not making anything with it, you're having a great fun of going into your castle. So yeah, pay us for the use of our money.
Okay. Thanks, Ed.
On to you, Bruce.
I loved what you've been saying, Ed, about the tax on consumers, and in the case of securities, the tax on the security users. And I also loved what John Howell was saying there. And I would love to come back to what you were talking about, John, not in the next 2 minutes, but later, and spend a lot more time on a couple of things that you said in terms of the various factors involved that need to be taken into account, like the tax and the concentration and so on. And I loved what Ed, you were saying in terms of the sector distribution, that kind of control on the distribution that has to be it may be legislated or something, because it's because of the danger of the danger that John pointed out of government control of the money. How is that not, how do we avoid simply increasing the concentration that's killing us? That to me is a critical question. And I think you pointed to some ways to do that. I also think that Omarova's proposal of a national investment authority would be another way to provide government advice as well as counseling. Now, I don't know what you think of that, but think along those lines. I think we need to think. The other comment I want to make is the focus on equity, the commons and the equity. That to me was priceless in your paper. I would translate equity as economic democracy, and I don't mean counterfeit democracy for some and not others, but for, and that's where race comes in and other forms of discrimination across the line. We need to be paying attention to these kinds of proposals on distribution. And the focus, as John said, the focus on the initial creation is a problem because of its initial distribution. So, defining reform in terms of distribution seems to me to be one of those factors. And I just wanted to echo that. Thanks very much for this wonderful talk.
Thank you so much for being here, Ed, and for writing your brilliant paper. And thank you to everyone for coming and bringing your brilliant remarks and ideas to the table to be discussed.
I want to thank you very much. Your help in me working with that paper over time has been invaluable. And you have been wonderful support. And a lot of what's gone on tonight is because of you.
Amen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know
Amen.
about that, but yeah.
Thank
Thank you. Really good discussion. People obviously had read your paper, a lot of them, so that mattered.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being a role model for us, Ed.
Yeah. That was great.